the word Pharaoh, what comes into your mind? Most people think of the supreme ruler of Egypt. This is correct, but the word did not always refer to the supreme ruler. Ancient Egyptian history is divided into different periods. The word Pharaoh, Egyptian Perah, had different meanings depending on the period of Egyptian history. Historically, the word Pharaoh only started being used as a title for the supreme ruler much later in Egyptian history, during the New Kingdom period. Before this, the word meant great house and was used to refer to the royal palace. The Encyclopedia Britannica states, Pharaoh, originally the royal palace in ancient Egypt. The word came to be used for the Egyptian king under the New Kingdom. Let's now analyze the Qur'an's accounts about Egypt in light of these historical facts. Like the Bible, the Qur'an discusses the prophets Joseph and Moses, who both spent time in Egypt. Joseph is dated by scholars to either the Middle Kingdom or Second Intermediate period, well before Pharaoh meant ruler. In the story of Joseph, the Qur'an repeatedly uses the word king to refer to the ruler of Egypt. He is never once called Pharaoh. Moses is dated by scholars to the New Kingdom period. In the story of Moses, the Qur'an repeatedly calls the ruler Pharaoh. He is never called king. We can see that the Qur'an is accurate in its use of language when it comes to describing the leader of Egypt at different periods in its history. How could the author of the Qur'an have known this? The only source of information about ancient Egypt that would have been readily available are the Bible-based stories. To claim that the Qur'an copied from the Bible is problematic because the Bible uses the word Pharaoh to refer to the Egyptian ruler in the story of Joseph, which is historically inaccurate. The Qur'an cannot have copied from the Bible because the Qur'an corrects the Bible. The Qur'an mentions the following incident about Joseph while he was in Egypt.
وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين.
Here the Qur'an states that Joseph was sold for a paltry price. The Arabic phrase used is darahima ma'dudatin, which contains the words dirham and ma'dud. Dirham means a unit of silver coinage or weight. Ma'dud means countable or limited in number. So the Qur'an is making the claim that Joseph was sold for a small amount of countable silver. There is plenty of historical evidence that standardized units of silver were used in transactions in ancient Egypt. Small pieces of silver, known as shati, were used in trade. The tomb of Nyankhnum and Khnumhotep is dated to the Old Kingdom period. It contains a scene of a busy open-air market with goods for sale. Cubits of cloth, for example, are said to be sold for 6 shati. The Rind mathematical papyrus is dated to the Second Intermediate period. It discusses the relative values of gold, silver and lead in terms of shati. Small silver bars bearing the name of Pharaoh Tutankhamun have been dated to the New Kingdom period. They are inscribed with a hieroglyphic which states, Tutankhamun, ruler of Heliopolis in Upper Egypt. Until recently, historians believed that the minting of precious metals was a later Greek invention. These recent Egyptian archaeological discoveries have forced historians to completely revise their understanding of coinage in the ancient world. How is it possible that such knowledge was revealed in the Qur'an nearly 1,500 years ago? The Bible mentions that Joseph was sold for 20 of silver. However, this sale is said to have taken place with some Arabs outside Egypt. By contrast, the Qur'an states that the sale took place inside Egypt. So, the Bible could not have been used as a source by the Qur'an. It is in fact the Bible that contains historical errors when it comes to coinage. For example, the Bible makes the claim that a gold coin known as the darik was used at the time of King David. They gave toward the work on the temple of God 5,000 talents and 10,000 darics of gold. As historians point out, the Darik is named after the Persian leader Darius the Great, who lived hundreds of years after King David. The Jewish Encyclopedia acknowledges this error. A notable instance of anachronism occurs in 1 Chronicles 29:7. Gold darics, coins which were not struck before the time of King Darius I, i.e., more than 400 years after David. Neither the Bible nor Qur'an identifies the Pharaoh of Moses by name. We can use the details provided in the scriptures to try to identify the Pharaoh. Both scriptures speak of the Israelites being taken into slavery before the birth of Moses. The use of Semites for slave labor occurred only during the New Kingdom period. So, we can place Moses somewhere in the New Kingdom period. This gives us a list of 33 possible pharaohs. Both scriptures also speak of an exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt. The Merneptah stele is an important artifact that contains the first explicit reference to Israel in the archaeological record. It is dated to around 1208 BCE. It discusses the land of Canaan and mentions the Israelites in relation to Canaan, indicating that the Exodus had already taken place by this date. The artifact is contemporaneous to the pharaoh Merneptah. This means that the Exodus had to take place before Merneptah, since Merneptah was alive and in power after the Exodus and not drowned in the sea. This establishes an upper boundary in the timeline of the pharaohs. From the point of view of both the Bible and Qur'an, we are now left with 18 pharaohs as candidates who may have ruled during the time of Moses. Let's now delve deeper into the biblical narrative. The Bible claims that there were 2 different pharaohs who were in power. The first died while Moses was in hiding in Midian. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The new Pharaoh continued his predecessor's persecution of the Israelites, and it was this second Pharaoh who was later drowned when Moses crossed the sea. The Bible gives us a timeline for these events. The burning bush encounter with God took place when Moses was 80 years old. So from his birth to the Exodus, there was a span of at least 80 years, during which 2 pharaohs ruled Egypt. Now, there is a big problem if we compare this biblical narrative to the timeline of the pharaohs. We've seen that the Bible claims exactly 2 pharaohs ruled during the 80-year period from the birth of Moses to the Exodus. If we consider the number of years that each of the pharaohs ruled, we can see that there is no 80-year period during which only 2 pharaohs ruled. Any given 80-year period will give you at least 3 pharaohs in power. We can see that the biblical narrative contradicts the historical evidence. Let's now compare the Quranic narrative. Unlike the Bible, the Qur'an depicts a single pharaoh reigning from the birth of Moses all the way up to the Exodus. The Qur'an informs us that Moses fled to Midian when he reached the age of maturity. The Qur'an defines the age of maturity as 40 years old. The Qur'an also informs us that during his time in Midian, Moses spent 8 to 10 years in the service of his father-in-law before returning to Egypt to face Pharaoh. This means that Moses was at least 48 years of age when the Exodus happened. The only Pharaoh during the New Kingdom period who had such a lengthy reign as an absolute ruler was Ramesses II, who ruled for 66 years. The Quranic account is perfectly in line with the historical evidence and fixes the chronological issues that are present in the biblical narrative.
What we do know, and what this suggests to me very clearly, is that this is not a book from God. This is not a book from any God that I know. We don't have these problems in the Bible like this. This is why it's beautiful when you have reference after reference in the Bible that talks about historical events. In fact, when you look at the Bible, we don't claim that it was eternally preserved or sent down, the Bible itself. And yet when you look at the Bible, we don't have these problems.